Henry Kerr, Henri. I bet no one's ever made that mistake before thinking you were French. Anyway. So as promised, here we go. This is what I've scribbled out on the whiteboard now. This is an established block periodization that works really well for you downhill mountain bikers, right? So we've got the timeline across the top here. We're already halfway through November though, and April, and then the first World Cup is about there, isn't it, in your hometown? Well, don't know if you live in Fort William, but your home state up in Scotland. So what I've got here is the macro cycle. These are mesocycles, these coloured blocks. The micro cycles that are typically a week long, I'll plan as we go. You can't just write out a 6-month program and then send someone. It never works out that way. You really have to kind of plan it as you go and build a program from communication between you and I. So what I'm going to talk to you about here is what I've got here. It all makes sense, and you'll hopefully have some questions to go with it, right? So if you look at this big aerobic base block here, then into intervals, and then into sport-specific endurance. They're not equated in length, these mesocycles. That's an amateur coach's move by doing 2 months, 2 months, 2 months. No. We can build a huge aerobic base, then go into intervals, then go into sport-specific endurance. The intervals, you don't need that long. The adaptations you get with those, I'll talk to you about when I see you in person. Ideally, I like to do this in person with the athlete because we can talk and you can place, I've got a family holiday there, there's going to be a team camp there, and we can kind of build it around that. But this is the best I can do for now. So there's a massive we've got 10 weeks where you can build a huge aerobic base. Loads of zone 3 and zone 4 riding at steady state, building that a massive aerobic base to work from later on, to use as a platform to work from later on. 1 in 4 workouts on that aerobic base training will be at max an absolute smoker, probably 1 in 5 just to keep your exposure to that really high intensity stuff. But here you're really laying down some foundation. The bigger the runway, the longer the plane that can take off on it. I love that analogy. Then you go into intervals between 1 and 6 minutes. You can use that time, different series variation. One day could be 1 minute intervals, next day could be 3, whatever. But if you haven't done a big aerobic base training here, you'll only manage 2 intervals and you'll be fucked. So hopefully you'll have a huge base of fitness. You can manage maybe 10 intervals before going into the sport-specific endurance. Right, so again, this is a platform for the intervals. The intervals is a platform for the sport-specific endurance. The most sports-specific thing you can do is ride your bike. Also, when you're riding your bike, you're going to be developing that riding skill that you need to compete in the World Cup season. Ideally, all of your cardio will be done on the bike there. If you can't ride 3 or 4 times a week, then yes, we can replicate that in the gym. But even though you can simulate the physiological demands of the sport in the gym, it's not the same. Like I said, you need to develop that skill. If you can ride your bike 3 or 4 times a week, you don't need to do it again in the gym, all right? And I'll stand by that. So if you look underneath here, now this is all the stuff that you'll be doing on the barbell in the gym, the weight training. So running alongside the aerobic base, the mesocycle is equated in length here as a hypertrophy block, building muscle, pretty much bodybuilding for the next 10 weeks, right? Trying to get some muscle on you, some new muscle, then turning that new muscle into new strength. That overlaps with the sport-specific endurance. That's okay though. Then that new strength into new power before the season. Now, the hypertrophy stops dead here. Strength and aerobic training interfere with each other somewhat. Aerobic training and hypertrophy complement each other. Strength and intervals and sport-specific endurance, they complement each other too, as long as you get the volume right. So after you've finished a block of hypertrophy here, this is going to be painful, by the way. It's probably 6 sessions a week, and your training splits will be like legs, back and biceps, chest and triceps, shoulders, those type of things, really trying to build you somewhat. And I'll probably do the same as this. So 1 in 5 workouts will probably be a strength and power one, just to keep your exposure to it, a heavy session. Then once you're out of this hypertrophy, I'll abandon hypertrophy altogether. You probably wouldn't have any exposure to it until you get maybe into the season. If there's a few weeks off in the season, you could come back a little bit. Into strength, the heavier stuff, repetitions between 1 and 5, typically over 70% of what you can lift for a 1 rep max. And you can use those percent ranges. You can train at 80% one day, 90% the next, 100, 70, whatever it might be, as variation as well. Because in strength blocks, there's not that much variation. It's bench press, rows, overhead press, RDLs, and squats. Pretty much they're the anchor of every workout. Like I said, you can use some variation windows for a bit of a change. and then into power. Now the power stuff looks the same on paper as the strength. It's repetition ranges between 1 and 5, but I'm asking for more speed on the bar, so you're going to have to use less weights. You typically use below 70% for the power stuff. I like a little bit less again. I like 60% because I like that speed. The short and sharp power stuff goes really well with the sport-specific endurance because it's non-fatiguing, right? So in a power phase, you might have 3 workouts a week. They'll be about half an hour long, and they're short and sharp, not going anywhere near failure. So they're non-fatiguing, giving you the maximum time on the bike of high quality. Whereas if you go too far with the strength, a heavy squat session might affect your riding on the weekend, and we don't want it to. Everything about here is how well you ride that bike, yeah? So what else we got here? Let's have a look. Like I said, I'd probably add in, maybe 1 in 5 would be heavy. This structure works. I wouldn't want you in a calorie deficit at any point. I don't care about what you weight. I hope you just be building. That is the one way that aerobic base training and hypertrophy can interfere. If the aerobic base is putting you into a calorie deficit, you're not going to be able to build muscle. High protein is always the biggest lever you can pull, but you are going to have to be eating like mad in a calorie surplus to get the benefit from both of these training sessions. Hypertrophy, probably 6 sessions a week and 4 cardio, probably 3 cardio and 3 there. Probably 3 days riding, 2 or 3 workouts there. So you imagine as the weather gets better as you get nearer the season, your gym time will drop off. The time you spend in the gym will drop off. Because as the weather improves, the time you spend on the bike will come up, right? So it's important that the program and your actual goals behind training work with each other. Let me think. You might look back here as well at things like creatine, maybe a supplement. It's always best if you can get all your nutrition from food, but I know it's difficult. And then over here, maybe looking at beta-alanine as a riding supplement to help you buffer against lactic acid. But hopefully that's what we're doing here. So we're using this as a rider platform there. Okay, man. Yeah, it makes sense. Like I said, ideally I'd do this in person. And we're going to have to build it as we go, built on communication between you and I, because you might break a collarbone there, or you might get a fucking girlfriend there, right? Ruin everything. Cool, man. But I'm up in Dundee on the 5th of December. I'm going up to see Nina Cameron at university there. So I can see you hopefully a day either side of that, if it works out, while I'm in the area. I know Dundee and Glasgow are pretty far from each other, but as far as I'm concerned, that's in the area if I'm going up there over the border. Cool, Henry. Let me know, brother.